What's something wrong you saw your parents doing as a kid, but didn't realize it was wrong until you got older? My parents are clean freaks, especially my dad. Their version of messy is leaving an article of clothing in the floor of my bedroom, not doing my laundry every week. I have enough clothing to last me 2 weeks, or leaving a water bottle on my dresser. And God help me if I waited until the next day to do dishes, because I was tired from working all day. I'd get screamed and told I was lazy. The worst was when both of them would say that no man would ever want me because I was so messy. They said he'd see how nasty I keep my house and he'd be disgusted. Now here's the flip side. Everyone else I know claim that I'm a clean freak because of how neat everything is. Desk, car, etc. I'm constantly making sure my work areas are clean. I keep my car spotless, and I even go home from work on my lunches to clean the house. So now that you know some backstory, here's my answer to the question. My coworker came up to me a few weeks ago and told me how that weekend she laid around the house for a few days instead of cleaned the house, which she said really needed to be done. I immediately asked her what her husband said about it. I was ready to hear how he yelled at her, how they got into an argument about the mess, especially since he works at a harder job that requires long hours. He's not a messy person and likes to keep things nice. Instead, she said he came home. She explained that she had been tired all weekend and told him she didn't get anything done. He then just shrugged his shoulders, said it was okay, sighed that they could do it another day, and then he chilled out with her. I didn't say anything except, oh. She left my desk to work on a project, not aware of how she just gave me a huge paradigm shift. I had to go to the bathroom so no one could see me cry. I never thought that there'd be any man out there who was a nice and clean guy that would accept that I had off days when it came to managing a household. I thought he'd yell at me and belittle me, or worse, leave, if I wasn't on my game at all times. To know that one day I'm going to have a husband that gave me grace and love like that floored me. I'm turning 27 next month and I just found this out. My mom had an affair with her drug dealer, and, when told she was unfit as a mother and had to stay in the state by the court, she told me we were going on a road trip and we all, my mom, her drug dealer, and I, drove 8 states away until a private detective found us. For some background, this happened when I was 9, and I'm 18 now, so I had to ask my granny for all of the details, unless you all wanted the story from a 9-year perspective. A man moved in on the other side of my neighborhood. We'll call him Jordan for the sake of privacy, and he deals drugs. He was letting both of my parents sample them. Crack, crank, whatever that is. I don't know anything about drugs, ecstasy, etc. Together for free, because he had a thing for my mom. My parents had a really horrible marriage, so it wasn't long before my mom started becoming interested too. When my dad realized my mom was having an affair, he went to file a divorce and try to take custody of my stepbrother, and my strung out mom's response was to just flee the state despite court orders not to, because of having to go to court for the divorce. I'm from Florida. I remember very briefly going through Maryland and Massachusetts at one point, but we weren't going on a linear pattern, since they found us in Georgia. My grandma's lawyer had ordered a private detective. I remember not minding being on the road trip, because I didn't have to go to school, and they bought me, had to do research to find this again, a Disney Hannah Montana Jack's Pacific plug-and-play TV electronic video game. I was alone in the hotel rooms playing that a lot. I was pretty sheltered in all of this. I woke up one morning to see my mom reading a letter from the court, crying and asking how they'd found her, and she had 2 choices: to bring me home and give up custody, or there'd be cops on the doorstep instead of a piece of mail. So she brought me home, and I lived with my granny for about 6 months while my mom was in rehab. Before I was totally competent swimming by myself, my mom would put a life jacket on me, tie a long piece of nylon rope to it, and chuck me in the river. She'd basically swim me on a leash down the river for fun. Mom, you are the classiest redneck. My mom harbored a weird ass guy who happened to be a fugitive in our basement for about 6 months until one day a bounty hunter, or plainclothes cop or something came into our house waving a gun, made 8-year-old me and my 6-year-old sister stand in a corner and dragged him out. Our mom took us to visit him in prison like 4 or 5 times over the following year. I honestly thought it was just a normal occurrence until about 3 years later when I told the story to my dad's divorce lawyer, and he was shocked it had never come up before, although I suppose it's not the type of thing you bring up in court if you don't have to, and my dad, who was deployed in Kosovo at the time, had no idea it had ever even happened. My parents argued constantly. They hated each other and still do. The only reason they never divorced is because they depend on each other financially. They always had separate rooms and everything. I never thought it was weird. I just always thought marriage wasn't for me because it looked like it was pointless and overall a pain in the ass. Eventually I graduated high school, moved out, and started dating. That's when I realized you can actually like your partner and prefer to be around them. I just had no idea. Our street was probably 2 miles long and gravel. Once we turned onto our street, my dad would let us lay on the hood, so we were only holding on by our fingers by the windshield, and he would fly down that gravel road trying to shake us off. Watching my brother topple off the car and into the ditch, and looking through the windshield to see my dad's head thrown back howling in laughter was a frightening experience for me. When I was little, about 5 years, I think one of my aunts had recently got married and moved to the UK. Her husband turned out to be a drunken arsehole who beat her regularly. She said nothing about it for a while. One night my family were visiting another uncle not that far away from her. That night she got severely beaten and needed to go to hospital. The hospital couldn't get in touch with her husband, so coincidentally called the house we were at. My father immediately stashed us all in the car and told his brother to follow. We went round to my aunt's house. My father kicked the door in, found the drunken bum upstairs, threw him out of the first floor window onto the street, where my other uncle proceeded to beat the shit out of him for a few minutes before we all left. My aunt never returned to the house and my father made her divorce the cunt. So I learned that domestic abuse should be talked about and reported, and that physical violence, although arguably maybe morally fine, is not something one should take into their own hands. Lying to get out of any problem, especially those caused by their own incompetence or malfeasance, it's still something I'm working on. My first thought when I'm running late is always some fake excuse like, oh, the traffic was terrible / the checkout girl was so slow / I was attacked by zombies, but I had a chainsaw, so I'm fine. But that's why it's 10 AM and I'm in pajamas and not at work yet. I have to continually tell myself that a person with integrity apologizes and either offers no explanation when none is required, or when it's not helpful, or tells the truth about what happened and accepts the consequences. Once me and my mom were at the bathroom sink brushing our teeth. After trying to brush my tongue, I looked at her and asked, "Do you ever gag when you brush your tongue?" In complete seriousness she said, "No. I got over my gag reflex when I met your dad." Years later I was brushing my teeth and thought of that and just froze on the spot. Oh, what the fuck, mom? My parents always told me that they were going to the doctor quite frequently. Of course, I hated visits to the doctor and was happy to not tag along. My siblings eventually went to the doctor quite frequently. When I was in high school, my fam brought it up during a holiday gathering, but I never pieced that puzzle together on my own. It was then that they revealed that going to the doctor was just a way to get me to stay home if anybody wanted to go somewhere without me. Errands, the mall, McDonald's. My mom's boyfriend forbade me from ever going in the garage. They said it was dangerous. I snuck in one day, get a hammer or something, and there were plants growing under lights. This was the 80s, so you'd still get serious prison time for pot. They found out I was in there because I didn't put the thing back. I was grounded from my bike and TV for a month. Those were two very important things to my 10-year-old self. My dad will drive to La with me and brothers while my mom was at work, about an hour away. He used to leave us at his friend's house while he went to do stuff for like 2 hours. Years later I realized he had a side chick, and I had a half sister same age as my little brother.